the New Yorkers who are descending on this site, we're all waking up and getting ready to attend the ceremonies that will take place here. As I say, bagpipers have been making their way to this site from across New York's 5 boroughs throughout the night. Shortly they will head down the ramp and into Ground Zero. The processionals are led by the pipe and drum corps from each of the 5 governmental agencies that played such a pivotal role in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy last September the 11th. The Fire Department of New York City, which lost 343 of its members. The Port Authority, the New York Police Department, and also the City Corrections and Sanitations Department, which played such a prominent role in helping to clear the rubble of this site. But if you take a look now at Ground Zero, you can see a large number of New Yorkers gathering on the lip of the site, with those who will be participating in this morning's ceremonies here gathering within the site itself. The ceremonies get underway just around 9:15 with a moment of silence. After that, Governor George Pataki of New York will be reading from the Gettysburg Address. Then Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, introduces the reading of the names, a reading of the names of all those people who died here last September the 11th. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani begins that reading, the former mayor of New York who played such a prominent role in the days and hours after the attacks occurred. There will be a pause for a second moment of silence just before 10 o'clock in the morning. That was the time at which the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. The reading of names will then continue, and then shortly before 10:30, taps will be played by a lone bugler. The governor of New Jersey, James McGreevey, will read from the Declaration of Independence, and at 10:29, the moment at which the North Tower of the World Trade Center fell, the second tower, essentially stripping New York City of its most prominent and best-known landmark. At that point, bells will toll throughout the city, and they will toll for much of the day here as the people of New York continue to honor those people who died back on September the 11th. We want to thank right from the outset our hosts here in New York. We are broadcasting to you from the building of Dow Jones, from where the Wall Street Journal newspaper is produced on a daily basis, and they have been very good in terms of opening the balcony of this building, not just to us, but to much of the world's media, all of whom are gathered here. We can give you a sense of exactly where we are. The world's media are atop the Wall Street Journal building here in New York City. And walking around this rooftop, you can hear so many different foreign accents, a real tribute to the sense in which the world reacted to September the 11th, and correspondents from all over the world have traveled here for this one-year commemoration. As the camera pans around, you can see South End Avenue, which leads just before ground. You can see the trucks that are there getting their signals back to the broadcasters around the world, and then people who started to gather here shortly after 5 o'clock in the morning on the edge of Ground Zero, trying to secure a position in order to see and participate in today's ceremonies. And in that crowd there are a large number of the relatives and friends who died. You can see people carrying photographs of some of their loved ones. Even this morning, people were still placing some of those missing posters that, of course, we all saw and were so prominent September 11th and in the days after September the 11th. Some of those posters have been placed on some of the trucks that are parked around this site. Many of the family members here say they will never truly give up looking for their loved ones. And one of the staggering things that you realize about what occurred here at Ground Zero is that it is still impossible to say with any certainty exactly how many people died. The official revised death toll for Ground Zero stands at 2,801. But of those, only 1,379 people, fewer than half, have been positively identified. So more than half the victims remain unidentified, creating a really desperate sense of loss and uncertainty for the families who remember the victims. Only 11 people who have been found at this site since last September the 11th have been identified in the traditional and time-honored way when family members are called together to formally identify a body. Everybody else has been identified using scientific techniques like DNA and fingerprinting and dental records, which again I think gives you, as if it was needed, a very real sense of the tragedy that occurred here 12 months ago. Security here in New York City today is extraordinarily tight. It was always going to be tight, and then yesterday, as you are probably aware, the US government declared a code orange security alert, the second highest alert that the US government can declare. The Attorney General, John Ashcroft, saying that the US government has received a clear indication that further attacks against American interests abroad, but also here at home, are in the pipeline. And so this part of Lower Manhattan was effectively locked down at around 6 o'clock this morning. We were all told to be in place by then, and it will remain locked down throughout the ceremony that is going to begin here in a little bit over half an hour. The buildings on the edge of Ground Zero are also themselves still very dramatically affected by the attacks of 1 year ago. Some of them remain shrouded with protective netting. The future for many of them remains uncertain. But on Ground Zero itself, the rebuilding work has already begun. You can see some of the subway lines that have been laid by the authorities here in New York, part of the plan to resume normal service here as soon as possible. And when you take a look at Ground Zero, you also get a very real sense of how some parts of the World Trade Center extraordinarily survived the attacks. You can see parts of the parking garage on the edge of Ground Zero that was attached to the World Trade Center. Some parts of that garage survived the attacks, while the buildings that the garage served, of course, did not. The future for this site remains a matter of heated debate here in New York City. It is agreed by everybody that some form of memorial will be built here, but what form that memorial will take is going to be discussed and debated in the months and perhaps even the years that lie ahead. There's also pressure to try and return Ground Zero to some sense of normalcy by returning business and commerce to the site, and so much discussion about how to blend the mix of business and commerce with a memorial to those who died here. Mayor Michael Bloomberg says that he hopes to have provisional plans in place by the spring of 2003. And while the clock is ticking, I think it's fair to say that there is also a sense that it's perfectly acceptable for New York to spend some time debating how it wants to memorialize those who died here. Remember, in Oklahoma City, it took 5 years for the memorial there to be planned, designed, and built, the memorial at the Murrah Federal Building. And the authorities here, I think, take the view that if it takes that long, that's just fine, given the scale of the loss that was suffered here. One of the most prominent landmarks at Ground Zero that will of course be an image familiar to most people who have followed the unfolding events here over the course of the past year is the cross that stands on the edge of the site. 2 metal girders found by rescue workers in precisely that position, and they have been left there, and it is understood that they will be left there and will form in some sense part of the permanent memorial whenever it is. That cross for many people became a symbol of the courage of those who were caught in the building exactly 1 year ago, the courage of those who responded to the call for rescue, but also a symbol of the desire to rebuild and carry on. And I think it's fair to say that New York in particular, and the country at large, is undergoing something of a conversation about how exactly to mark this day. It is such a difficult day to think back on 12 months ago, and the emotions for many people remain so raw and so close to the surface that it's very difficult in a sense to determine exactly how best to acknowledge the magnitude of the crisis that unfolded at 8:46 in the morning on September the 11th, 2001. A crisis that ultimately became a global crisis as the details of the plot to attack the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the hijack of United Flight 93, which crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after it is assumed that the passengers on board bravely overcame their hijackers. All of those issues, as they unfolded, really sparked a very significant global crisis with which the country has been dealing for the past 12 months. But at the end of the day, for many New Yorkers, it all comes down to personal loss. Virtually everybody that you meet in this city will tell you that they knew someone or knew someone who was killed or injured in the attack on the World Trade Center. And that's why you're seeing, I think, such an emotional response today, not just to the loss of this city's most prominent landmark, the symbol of America's financial power, which is, of course, precisely one of the reasons why it was targeted by those hijackers, but also that very, very great sense of personal loss and community coming together that this city has seen over the course of the past 12 months. The New York Times published an editorial 2 days ago entitled "Things Regained, Things Lost." And the newspaper wrote that the city has only begun to recover itself a year later. On a late summer morning midweek, you can stand almost anywhere in Manhattan and feel the city rumble. The rumble seemed to fade away that morning a year ago, once the roar of the falling towers had ended. And in the silence afterward, it became clear that what made this city a single thing, what gave it its metaphorical unity, wasn't the asphalt and the steel and the rock beneath it all. It was the people. President Bush will be here at Ground Zero a little bit later on this afternoon. He'll be visiting the site between 4 and 5 o'clock this evening. We'll be bringing you that live when it happens a little bit later on in the day. And the President will also be addressing the nation tonight, talking to people about the last 12 months and what has occurred, but also, we expect, talking about the future war on terror ahead of his very important speech before the United Nations General Assembly, which is due to take place here tomorrow. The whole of New York, in some way, is marking this extraordinary day. The financial markets have decided to open at 11 o'clock this morning so that many of the traders and brokers who knew people who died or were injured in the World Trade Center attacks can themselves participate in this morning's ceremonies. Mayor Michael Bloomberg has said that he does not want today, this year or any other year, to be a holiday. There's been some discussion here and in the country broadly about whether September the 11th should become a holiday. Some have suggested it should be known as Heroes Day. Mayor Bloomberg has said that he doesn't think that that's the right thing to do, and the governor of New Jersey, James McGreevey, has also rejected the idea, saying that he believes the move would be too costly. But it is certainly an idea that will be, I think, debated in the months and years that lie ahead. We're going to see at the ceremonies here this morning the three men who, in a sense, will really determine the future of this site. Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York City, Governor George Pataki of New York State, who does face a re-election challenge this November, but who at the moment, and if he is re-elected, will continue to wield considerable power over the decision-making process, and also the governor of New Jersey, James McGreevey. Those three men becoming very much pivotal figures in the decision-making process about what to do here at Ground Zero, how to rebuild, when to rebuild, and how to memorialize those who lost. And Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who played such a prominent role and who we will see in a short while reading the first names of those who died on September the 11th, 2001, also plays still a significant ongoing role. He has a lot of influence in this city because, of course, he's so associated with the events of September the 11th, 2001, and his voice is also likely to be heard as the process makes its way forwards. You can see the ring in the center of Ground Zero. That's literally been constructed in the last 24 hours. Yesterday when we were here looking at the site from this vantage point, it wasn't there. It's been put together for these ceremonies today, and it's understood that that's where family members will place flowers when they visit the site a little bit later on this morning. As I said earlier, it's going to be a searingly emotional moment for members of the families of the victims, because the vast majority of them have not previously had an opportunity to visit Ground Zero itself. The process of clearing the rubble and the debris was only recently completed, and Mayor Bloomberg decided that today would be an apposite day for family members to visit the site and pay tribute to their loved ones. And for so many of them, this is really hallowed ground now. Terrain that will inexorably forever be associated with a chapter in their own personal family's history. And I think as that process gets underway, once the ceremonies have ended at around 10:30 Eastern Time, we'll see some extremely difficult and emotional moments as family members, as I said, many of them still clutching photographs of those that they lost, walk down that ramp and head towards the center ring in the middle of Ground Zero. It's estimated that more than 2,000 small businesses, including 600 that were located in the Twin Towers themselves, were wiped out completely as a result of the attacks on September the 11th, 2001. Attacks that were really aimed at undermining America's financial, military, and governmental hearts. The federal government earmarked $700 million to aid businesses in Lower Manhattan, and many of them are still struggling to recover and in many cases to start all over again. A lot of businesses, particularly in Lower Manhattan, have had a difficult decision to make today, a decision about whether to open or close, whether to treat this as a normal working day, a symbol of America's resilience and ongoing determination not to be undermined, by terrorist attacks, or whether to shut down and close for the day out of respect to those people who died. And different businesses have made different decisions. One local store owner was quoted in the New York Times a few days ago as saying, "They win if we close up shop," and he was determined to stay open today. Others have decided that it's inappropriate for them to be open. Broadway theatres here in New York City have been allowed to make their own decisions. It's understood that around 2/3 of them will remain dark today, but a lot of the city's restaurants are planning to be open, and City Hall is going to be open, so it will be business as usual for those residents who need to pay a visit to City Hall. The financial effects of the attacks on America are still being felt fully 12 months on. We were hearing this morning that opinion polls are suggesting that 1 in 3 Americans, only 1 in 3 Americans I should say they would be prepared to travel by air today, September 11th, 2002. And indeed, it was reported this morning that one red-eye flight from the West Coast heading toward New York overnight, last night and into this morning, was so empty that all the passengers on board were moved into the first-class cabin. So few people are willing to fly, and that's another indication of the ongoing economic devastation caused by the attacks on September the 11th. The city comptroller of New York, William Thompson, estimates that the September the 11th attack cost the city some $95 billion. It destroyed 13 million square feet of office space, which is an amount of office space equal to all the office space in the business district of cities like Atlanta or Miami. New York City lost nearly $3 billion in lost taxes and almost $500 million in unreimbursed expenses. The city now has 83,000 fewer jobs than it did before September the 11th. And the city estimates that 63,000 jobs that would have been created as the city was recovering from the economic downturn it was experiencing in the run-up to September the 11th have also been lost. When you visit this site, one of the things that you can't stop musing about, you just simply can't get away from, is its sheer size. This is literally now a 16-acre hole in the ground, a hole in the heart of Lower Manhattan, that just 12 months ago was such a bustling and busy symbol of everything that up until then was New York. We can see now dignitaries arriving for the ceremony that will take place this morning, including their Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York. A man who last September the 11th could not possibly know, as day broke over his city, that he was about to find himself facing a very different agenda to the one that he had campaigned on to become mayor of New York City, an agenda that would essentially become dominated by the response to the attacks of September the 11th. You can see there the podium at which this morning's ceremonies will take place. They'll begin in around 17 minutes' time at 8:45, with a moment of silence leading in to 8:46, the very point at which the first aircraft, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, a second hijacked airliner, United Flight 175, also out of Boston, crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center in images that I think it is fair to say are seared in the consciousness of everybody who can recall that day 12 months ago, one of those moments in history that everybody will always remember where they were when they first saw and heard of the attack on the World Trade Center and the subsequent attack on the Pentagon. You can see there in the crowd some of the family members on either side of the bagpipers holding the photographs of those people that they lost. An image redolent of the images that developed late in the day on September the 11th last year around the Armory here in New York City, in Murray Hill in Lower Manhattan, as people posted what seemed at the time to be just an endless stream of posters describing their relatives and their loved ones, their friends, in a desperate attempt to try and find those people who were lost in the Twin Towers. And that process continues. Even a couple of weeks ago, it transpired that one gentleman who it was assumed had died in the Twin Towers, in fact had not, and was alive in hospital suffering from amnesia as a direct result of the trauma that he experienced on September the 11th, making it additionally difficult for many of these family members to comprehend fully the scale of the disaster that engulfed this segment of the city and their own personal family histories. Later in the day, foreign heads of state will visit Ground Zero at the invitation of Mayor Michael Bloomberg. They will do so partly because they're in New York City anyway for the opening of the United Nations General Assembly session tomorrow, at which President Bush will speak. He's the first speaker at tomorrow morning's session here. But they will do so also partly because so many foreign nationals died in the attacks on the World Trade Center, foreign nationals from more than 60 individual countries, and many of their heads of state will visit the site this afternoon. 10 people from Britain died in the attack on the Twin Towers, 20 Colombians, 15 Filipinos, 16 Jamaicans, 23 Japanese, 16 people from Mexico, 5 Germans, 2 people from Haiti, and 1 Australian. That list very much a vivid symbol of the melting pot of different races and cultures that New York has always prided itself on being. A symbol that is as true today as it has ever been in this city. And so later on this evening, President Bush will address the nation from Ellis Island, the gateway to America for so many immigrants, and he will do so with the Statue of Liberty aglow in the background. And we will bring you the President's visit to Ground Zero between 4 and 5 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon. If you're just joining us, we are bringing you exclusive coverage on HDNet in high definition of the ceremonies that are underway here in New York City to mark the 12-month anniversary of the attacks on America. And you can see there the band of the New York Police Department heading to the site itself, heading shortly down the ramp that will take them towards Ground Zero itself. So you can see members of these processionals now making their way down the ramp that leads to Ground Zero. These various bagpipe bands have been marching all night through New York City. They set out from the city's 5 boroughs at 1 o'clock in the morning and made a slow progress toward Ground Zero to participate in this morning's ceremonies. They represent the 5 governmental agencies that were so prominent in last September's recovery efforts: the Fire Department of New York, the Port Authority, the New York Police Department, and the City Corrections and Sanitations Department. And as we head towards 8:46, it's now coming up to 38 minutes past 8 in the morning here in New York City, there's a real sense of quiet descending on this entire site. The ceremonies itself will begin with a moment of silence, but the moment of silence officially doesn't commence until 8:45, but even now it's significantly quieter than it was here just an hour ago. We will then in a short while hear excerpts from the Gettysburg Address and the Declaration of Independence. And there has been some debate in New York City and in the wider country about whether or not it's justified simply to reach back in history to ancient texts in order to pay tribute to those who died so recently. Asked about that, Mayor Bloomberg said that the Gettysburg Address, originally delivered by Abraham Lincoln back on November the 19th, 1863, simply could not be bettered. It's the most appropriate thing that anybody could say, said the mayor. Everything that Abraham Lincoln talked about then is still true. And there's no doubt that as we hear it read by Governor George Pataki in a while, you'll hear what the mayor meant. One of the ironies, of course, that when the Gettysburg Address was originally delivered by Abraham Lincoln, he commented that future generations would not focus on what he was saying on that day at Gettysburg, and yet today the Gettysburg Address is selected as the most meaningful piece of prose that could be delivered at this site. The only fresh prose that you'll hear today will come from President Bush when he addresses the nation tonight, and also from preachers and clerics and religious leaders across the country who have been delivering sermons focused on the events of last September the 11th over the course of the past week, and will continue doing so today. As we listen to President Bush tonight, it will be interesting to see whether he reaches back in history in his presidential address. It'll be interesting to see which sources he cites as he faces once again the very difficult task of speaking to the nation about the sorely trying circumstances that many Americans have been trying to come to terms with over the course of the past year. In around 3 minutes' time, the official ceremonies will commence here at Ground Zero, and a very large crowd has now gathered on South End Avenue to watch Mayor Bloomberg, Governor Pataki, former Mayor Giuliani, and Governor McGreevey participate in the ceremonies and get this day formally underway. We will bring you the ceremony in its entirety with a minimum of commentary, so that in every regard you can feel as close to it and as much a part of it as we feel here today covering these events.
Yeah, we do.
So very shortly, this entire wonderful city will fall silent to mark the moment at which, 12 months ago, the events of September the 11th were unleashed by American Airlines Flight 11 crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And this entire city will literally fall silent to honor that occasion, and I suspect will continue to fall silent at this moment every year in the years that lie ahead.
Again today, we are a nation that mourns. Again today, we take into our hearts and minds those who perished on this site 1 year ago, and also those who came to toil in the rubble to bring order out of chaos, and those who throughout these 12 months have struggled to help us make sense of our despair. Now we join with our fellow Americans in a minute of silence, led by President George W. Bush from the South Lawn of the White House in Washington. One 139 years ago, President Abraham Lincoln looked out at his wounded nation as he stood on a once beautiful field that had become its saddest and largest burial ground. Then it was Gettysburg. Today it is the World Trade Center, where we gather on native soil to share our common grief. Governor George E. Pataki.
Thank you, Mayor Bloomberg. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that the nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far beyond our poor powers to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is, rather, for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
They were our neighbors, our husbands, our children, our sisters, our brothers, and our wives. They were our countrymen and our friends. They were us. Mayor Rudolph W. Giuliani.
Gordon M. Ahmad Jr. Edelmiro Abad. Maria Rose Abad. Andrew Anthony Abadi. Vincent Abadi. Lawrence Christopher Abel. Alona Abraham. William F. Abrahamson. Richard Anthony Acedo. Jesus Acevedo Rescand. Heinrich Bernard Ackerman. Paul Aquaviva. Donald Leroy Adams. Patrick Adams. Shannon Lewis Adams. Stephen George Adams. Ignatius Odo Adanga. Christy A. Adamo. Terrence E. Adderley, Jr. Sophia Boruwad Addo. Lee Allen Adler. Daniel Thomas Afflito. Emmanuel Akwazi Afuakwa. Alak Agarwal. Mokul Kumar Agarwala. Joseph Agnello. David Scott Agnes. Brian G. Ahern. Jeremiah Joseph Ahern. Joanne Maria Alayados. Shabir Ahmed. Terrence Andre Aiken. Godwin Ajawala. Gertrude M. Alagero. Andrew Alameno. Margaret Ann Alario. Gary M. Albero. John Leslie Albert. Peter Alderman. Jacqueline Delane Aldridge. David D. Alger. Sarah Ali Escarcega. Ernest Alicacos.
Edward L. Allegretto.
Eric Allen.
Joseph Ryan Allen.
Richard Dennis Allen.
Richard Leonard Allen.
Christopher E. Allingham.
Anna Allison.
Janet M. Alonzo.
Arturo Alva Marino.
Anthony Alvarado.
Antonio Javier Alvarez.
Victoria Alvarez Burrito.
Telmo E. Alver.
Cesar Almoranto Alviar.
Tariq Amanula.
Angelo Amaranto.
James M. Amato.
Joseph Amatuccio.
Christopher Charles Amoroso.
Kazuhiro Anai.
Calixto Anaya Jr.
Joseph Enchandia.
Kermit Charles Anderson.
Yvette Constance Anderson.
John Andrea Kehoe.
Michael Rourke Andrews.
Jean Ann Andrucki.
Siunia Ang.
Joseph Angelini Jr.
Joseph Angelini Sr.
David Lawrence Angel.
Laura Angeletta.
Doreen J. Angrasani.
Peter Paul Apollo.
Sima A. Oyama.
Frank Thomas Acalino.
Faustina Apasal Jr.
David Arce.
Patrick Michael Aranios.
Louis Arena.
Michael George Arsinski.
Adam P. Arias.
Barbara Jean Arestigi.
Jack Charles Aron.
Michael Armstrong.
Richard Avery Aronoff.
Joshua Aron.
Yafet Jesse Artie.
Myra Joe Aronson.
Carl Asaro.
Patrick Asante.
Michael Edward Asher.
Michael Asiak.
Thomas J. Ashton.
Janice Marie Ashley.
Will O. Asitenbag.
Greg Arthur Atlas.
Gerard T. Atwood.
James Audifred.
Lois Frank Adversano Jr.
Ezra Aviles.
Sandy Ayala.
Arlene T. Babakitis.
Eustace P. Bacchus.
John J. Badagliaca.
Jane Ellen Bassler.
Robert J. Byerwalter.
Andrew J. Bailey.
Brett T. Bailey.
Garnett Edward Bailey.
Tatiana Bakalinskaya.
Michael S. Bax.
Sharon M. Balkan.
Michael Andrew Bain.
Catherine Bantis.
Gerard Baptist.
Walter Barron.
Gerard A. Barbara.
Paul Vincent Barbaro.
James William Barbella.
Ivan Kirillos F. Barbosa.
Victor Daniel Barbosa.
Christine Barbudo.
Colleen Ann Barkow.
Dable Michael Barkway.
Matthew Barnes.
Sheila Patricia Barnes.
Evan J. Barron.
Renee Barrett Arjun.
Natalie Barrios La Cruz.
Arthur Thaddeus Berry.
Diane G. Berry.
Maurice Vincent Berry.
Scott D. Bart.
Carlton W. Bartles.
Guy Bartfi.
Ina B. Basina.
Alicia Basmajian.
Kenneth William Basnicki.
Stephen Bates.
Paul James Batiglia.
Walter David Bauer Jr.
Marlene Capito Bautista.
Mark Lawrence Bavis.
Jasper Baxter.
Michelle Beal.
Paul Frederick Biatini.
Jane S. Beatty.
Lawrence Ira Beck.
Manette Marie Beckles.
Carl John Badigian.
Michael Ernest Beekman.
Maria A. Bear.
Yelena Belavosky.
Nina Patrice Bell.
Debbie Bellows.
Stephen Elliott Belson.
Paul M. Benedetti.
Denise Lenore Benedetto.
Maria Bangachea.
Brian Craig Bennett.
Eric L. Bennett.
Oliver Duncan Bennett.
Margaret L. Benson.
Dominic J. Berardi.
James Patrick Berger.
Stephen Howard Berger.
John A. Bergen.
Alvin Bergson.
Daniel Bergstein.
Graham Andrew Berkeley.
Michael J. Berkeley.
Donna M. Bernards.
David W. Bernard.
William Bernstein.
David M. Berry.
David S. Berry.
Joseph J. Berry.
William Reed Bethke.
Timothy Betterly.
Carolyn Biong.
Edward Frank Baye.
Paul Bayer.
Anil Talhiram Baneve.
Bella J. Bokan.
Shimi D. Vijayalaisen.
Peter Alexander Billfield.
William G. Bigart.
Brian Belcher.
Carl Vincent Binney.
Gary Eugene Bird.
Joshua David Birnbaum.
George John Bishop.
Jeffrey Donald Bittner.
Albert Baliwa Blackman Jr.
Christopher Joseph Blackwell.
Susan Leigh Blair.
Harry Blanding Jr.
Janice Lee Blaney.
Craig Michael Blass.
Rita Blau.
Richard Middleton Blood Jr.
Michael Andrew Bucardi.
John P. Baki.
Michael Leopoldo Buccino.
Susan M. Buccino.
Bruce D. Bowen.
My name is Marianne Keene. My stepfather, Franco Lalama, was an engineer for the Port Authority. He worked on the 64th floor of the World Trade Center. I read this for his memorial. I don't remember the last time I told him that I loved him. I would give anything to go back to the morning of September 11th and tell him how much I appreciate everything he's done for me. But I think he knows that now. In my eyes, he's died a hero. And how much more could you ask for? There's a quote that pretty much speaks for itself. You never lose anything. Not really. Things, people, they go away sooner or later. You can't hold them any more than you can hold the moonlight. But if they've touched you, if they're inside of you, then they're still yours. Frank, as I look back on these days, I realize how much I'll truly miss you and how much I truly love you. You were the best father I could ever ask for. I miss you, and I hope you didn't hurt too much. Love, Marianne.
Mary Catherine Bofa.
Nicholas Andrew Bogdan.
Darren Christopher Bohan.
Lawrence Francis Boisseau.
Vincent M. Bolin Jr.
Tori Belorchi.
Alan Bondargenko.
Andre Bonhier Jr.
Colin Arthur Bonet.
Frank Bonamo.
Yvonne Lucia Bonanno.
Genevieve Bonsignore.
Sean Booker.
Kelly Ann Boones.
Sherry Ann Bordeaux.
Christine Bordenabe.
Martin Borziski.
Richard Edward Bosco.
Claus Volte.
Carol Marie Bouchard.
John Bolton.
Francisco Eligio Bordier.
Thomas Harold Bowden Jr.
Kimberly S. Bowers.
Veronique Nicole Bowers.
Sean Edward Bowman Jr.
Larry Bowman.
Kevin L. Bowser.
Gary R. Box.
Gennady Boyarsky.
Pamela Boyce.
Michael Boyle.
Alfred Braca.
Kevin Bracken.
David Brian Brady.
Alexander Braginski.
Nicholas W. Brandemarty.
Daniel Raymond Brandhorst.
David Reed Gamboa Brandhurst.
Michelle Renee Bratton.
Patricia Brout.
Lydia E. Bravo.
Ronald Michael Breitweiser.
Edward A. Brennan III.
Francis Henry Brennan.
Michael E. Brennan.
Peter Brennan.
Thomas M. Brennan.
Daniel J. Brathel.
Gary Lee Bright.
Jonathan Briley.
Mark A. Brisman.
Paul Gary Bristow.
Mark Francis Broderick.
Henry Charles Broghammer.
Keith A. Broomfield.
Janice Shalewis Brown.
Lloyd Stanford Brown.
Patrick J. Brown.
Bettina Brown.
Mark Bruce.
Ronald George Bruherty.
Andrew Brune.
Vincent Brunton.
Ronald Paul Buca.
Brandon J. Buchanan.
Gregory Joseph Buck.
Dennis Buckley.
Nancy Claire Buesh.
Patrick Joseph Booz.
John Edwards Bulaga Jr.
Stephen Boonin. William Francis Burke Jr. Matthew J. Burke.
Thomas Daniel Burke.
Donald J. Burns.
Kathleen Ann Burns.
Keith James Burns.
John Patrick Burnside.
Irina Buslow.
Milton G. Bustillo.
Thomas M. Butler.
Patrick Byrne.
Timothy D. Byrne.
Jesus Neptali Cabezas.
Lillian Caceres.
Brian Joseph Cachia.
Stephen Dennis Gafiero Jr.
Richard M. Cagiano.
Cecile Morella Cacuicla.
John Brett Cahill.
Michael John Cahill.
Scott Walter Cahill.
Thomas Joseph Cahill.
George Kane.
Salvatore B. Calabro.
Joseph Calendrijo.
Philip B. Calgano.
Edward Calderon.
Kenneth Marcus Caldwell.
Dominic Enrico Calia.
Felix Calitz
Frank Callahan.
Leanne Callahan.
Luigi Calvi.
Rocco Camas.
Michael F. Camerata.
David Otay Campbell.
Jeffrey Thomas Campbell.
Jill Marie Campbell.
Robert Arthur Campbell.
Patricia Campbell.
Sean Thomas Canavan.
John A. Candela.
Vincent Cangelosi.
Stephen J. Cangelosi.
Lisa Bella Canova.
Brian Canarazzo.
Michael Canty.
Louis Anthony Calvarici.
Jonathan Neff Capello.
James Christopher Capers.
Richard Michael Caproni.
Jose Manuel Cardona.
Dennis M. Carey.
Steve Carey.
Edward Carlino.
Michael Scott Carlo.
David G. Carlone.
Rosemary C. Carlson.
Mark Stephen Carney.
Joyce Ann Carpenetto.
Ivan Luis Carpio Batista.
Jeremy M. Carrington.
Michael Carroll.
Peter Carroll.
James Joseph Carson Jr.
Christopher Mikel Costigan.
Marcia Cecil Carter.
James Marcel Cartier.
Vivian Casaldic.
John Francis Casaza.
Paul R. Cascio.
Margarita Casillas.
Thomas Anthony Casoria.
William Otto Caspar.
Alejandro Castaño.
Herman Castillo Garcia.
Arcelia Castillo.
Leonard M. Castellano.
Jose Ramon Castro.
Richard G. Cattarelli.
Christopher Sean Caton.
Robert John Caulfield.
Mary Teresa Caulfield.
Judson Cavalier.
Michael Joseph Coley.
Jason David Kane.
Juan Amando Sebilio.
Jason Michael Cefalu.
Thomas Joseph Selick.
Anna Mercedes Centennial.
Joni Sesta.
Jeffrey Mark Chernoff.
Swarna Shelasny.
William Chalkoff.
Lu.
Charles Lawrence Chan.
Mandy Chang.
Mark Lawrence Charette.
Gregorio Manuel Chavez.
Delrose E. Chatham.
Pedro Franklin Checo.
Douglas McMillan Cherry.
Stephen Patrick Cherry.
Vernon Paul Cherry.
Nestor Julio Chevalier.
Swade Chevalier.
Alexander H. Chang.
Dorothy J. Kikar Piaro.
Luis Alfonso Chimbo.
Robert Chin.
Wing Y. Ching.
Nicholas Paul Chafalo.
John Chipura.
Peter A. Carcarillo.
Catherine Charles.
Kiyun P. Cho.
Abul K. Chowdhury.
Mohammed Salahuddin Chaudhuri.
Kirsten L. Christophe.
Pamela Chu.
Stephen Shuknick.
Y. Chung.
Christopher Chiafardini.
Alex F. Ciccone.
Francis Ann Chilente.
Elaine Chilo.
Nestor Andre Citron III.
Edna Cintron.
Robert Dominic Siri.
Juan Pablo Cisneros Alvarez.
Benjamin Keith Clark.
Eugene Clark.
Gregory Allen Clark.
Manny Leroy Clark.
Thomas R. Clark.
Christopher Robert Clark.
Donna Marie Clark.
Michael J. Clark.
Saria Rachel Emma Clark.
Kevin Francis Cleary.
James D. Clear.
Jeffrey W. Cloud.
Susan Marie Klein.
Stephen Coakley.
Jeffrey Allen Cole.
Patricia A. Cody.
Daniel Michael Coffey.
Jason M. Coffey.
Florence G. Cohen.
Kevin Sanford Cohen.
Anthony Joseph Caladonato.
Mark Joseph Caleo.
Stephen J. Coleo.
Christopher M. Colasanti.
Kevin Nathaniel Colbert.
Michael P. Colbert.
Keith E. Coleman.
Scott Thomas Coleman.
Taro Coleman.
Liam Joseph Colhoun.
Robert D. Collin.
Robert J. Cole.
Gene Collin.
John Michael Collins.
Michael L. Collins.
Thomas J. Collins.
Joseph Collison.
Jeffrey Dwayne Coleman.
Patricia Malia Kolodner.
Linda M. Colon.
Saul E. Colon.
Ronald Edward Comer.
Sandra Jolene Conati Brace.
Jaime Concepcion.
Albert Condé.
Denise Connolly.
Susan P. Conlon.
Margaret Mary Connor.
Cynthia Marie Lease Connolly.
John E. Connolly Jr.
James Lee Connor.
Jonathan M. Connors.
Kevin Patrick Connors.
Kevin F. Conroy.
Jose Manuel Contreras Fernandez.
Brenda E. Conway.
Dennis Michael Cook.
Helen D. Cook.
Jeffrey W. Combs.
John A. Cooper.
Joseph John Capo, Jr.
Gerard J. Coppola.
Joseph Albert Corbett.
John J. Corcoran III.
Alejandro Cordero.
Robert Cordiz.
Ruben D. Correa.
Danny A. Correa Gutierrez.
James J. Corrigan.
Carlos Cortez.
Kevin Cosgrove.
Dolores Marie Costa.
Lina Alexandra Costanza.
Charles Gregory Costello Jr.
Michael S. Costello.
Conrad K. Catoy.
Martin J. Coglin.
John Gerard Coglin.
Timothy J. Coglin.
James E. Cove.
Andre Cox.
Frederick John Cox.
James Raymond Coyle.
Michelle Coyle Iula.
Anne Marie Kramer.
Christopher S. Kramer.
Denise Elizabeth Krant.
James Leslie Crawford Jr.
Robert James Crawford.
Tara Kathleen Creamer.
Joanne Mary Cregan.
Lucy Crafazzi.
John A. Krishy.
Daniel Hal Chrisman.
Dennis Cross.
Kevin Raymond Crotty.
Thomas G. Crotty.
John Crow.
Wells Ramey Crowther.
Robert L. Cruikshank.
John Robert Cruz.
Grace U. Chua.
Kenneth John Cubas.
Francisco Cruz Cubero.
Thelma Cuccinello.
Richard J. Cudina.
Neil James Cudmore.
Thomas Patrick Cullen III.
Joyce Cummings.
Brian Thomas Cummins.
Michael Cunningham.
Robert Curatolo.
Lawrence Damian Couturier.
Paul Dario Curioli.
Patrick Curavan.
Andrew Peter Charles Curry Green.
Beverly Curry.
Michael S. Curtin,
Gavin Cushney,
John Delaria,
Vincent Gerard Damadeo,
Jack D'Ambrosi,
Mary D. Antonio,
Edward A. Diatri,
Michael D. Dioria,
Michael Jude Desposito,
Manuel John Damota,
Caleb Aaron Black,
Carlos S. Da Costa,
Joao Alberto da Fonseca,
Brian Paul Dale,
Thomas A. Damaskinos,
Janine Marie DiMano Jones,
Patrick W. Danahy,
Nana Danso,
Vincent Dons,
Dwight Donald Darcy,
Elizabeth Ann Darling,
Annette Andrea Dataram,
Lawrence Davidson,
Michael Allen Davidson,
Scott Matthew Davidson,
Titus Davidson,
New Yorka Davila,
Clinton Davis,
Wayne Terrill Davis,
Anthony Richard Dawson,
Calvin Dawson,
Edward James Day,
Dorothy Alma Diarejo,
J. Sorrell M. De Chavez,
Jennifer De Jesus,
Monica E. De Jesus,
Neridia De Jesus,
Emerita de la Peña,
Azucente Maria de la Torre,
Jose Nicolas de Peña,
David Paul De Rubio,
Jamal Lagaze de Santis,
Christian Louis De Simone,
Melanie Louise de Vere,
William Thomas Dean,
Robert J. DeAngelis Jr.,
Thomas Patrick DeAngelis,
Tara E. DeBeck,
Anna Maria DeBin,
James V. de Blasi,
Paul DeCola,
Simon Marash de Dufkash,
Jason DeFazio,
David A. DeFeo,
Manuel de Valla Jr.,
Donald Arthur de la Peña,
Vito Joseph DeLeon,
Danielle Ann DeLee.
God bless them all.
Joseph A. de la Pietra,
Andrea Della Bella,
Palmena Delegante,
Colleen N. DeLaury,
Francis Albert de Martinez,
Anthony Demas,
Martin N. de Mayo,
Francis Deming,
Carol K. Demetz,
Kevin Dennis,
Thomas F. Dines,
Jean De Palma,
Robert John Durrani,
Michael DeRienzo,
Edward Desimoni III,
Andrew Desperito,
Sandy N. Dewell,
Jerry DeVito,
Robert P. DeBeth Jr.,
Dennis Lauren Devlin,
Gerald Dewan,
Sulamanali Kasamali Danani,
Patricia Florence DeSharon,
Deborah Ann DiMartino,
Michael Louis D'Agostino,
Matthew Diaz,
and Nancy Diaz.
Rafael Arturo Diaz.
God bless all of us.
Michael A. Diaz Piedra III,
Judith Berkes Diaz Sierra,
Joseph Dermot Dickey Jr.,
Lawrence Patrick Dickerson,
Michael D. Deal,
John DeFato,
Vincent DeFazio,
Carl Anthony DeFranco,
Donald DeFranco,
David DeMilingo,
Stephen Patrick Dimino,
William John Demling,
Marisa DiNardo Sharp,
Christopher M. DeCuff,
Jeffrey Mark Dingle,
Anthony D'Anzio,
George DiPasquale,
Joseph DiPaleto,
Douglas Fran Di Stefano,
Don Demerico D. Leo,
Ramsey A. Doney,
John Joseph Doherty,
Melissa C. Doy,
Brendan Dolan,
Neil Matthew Dollard,
Joseph Domenico,
Benilda Pascua Domingo,
Alberto Dominguez,
Carlos Dominguez,
Jerome Mark Patrick Dominguez,
Kevin W. Donnelly,
Jacqueline Donovan,
Stephen Scott Dorff,
Thomas Dowd,
Kevin Dowdell,
Mary Yolanda Dowling,
Raymond Matthew Downey,
Frank Joseph Doyle,
Joseph Michael Doyle,
Randall W. Drake,
Stephen Patrick Driscoll,
Myrna A. Duarte,
Luke A. Dudek,
Christopher Michael Duffy,
Gerard Duffy,
Michael Joseph Duffy,
Thomas W. Duffy,
Antoinette Duger,
Sariv Ducat,
Christopher Joseph Dunn,
Richard Anthony Dunstan,
Patrick Thomas Dwyer,
Joseph Anthony Ikobachi,
John Bruce Eagleson,
Robert Douglas Eden,
Dean Philip Eberling,
Margaret Ruth Echterman,
Paul Robert Eckna,
Constantine Economus,
Dennis Michael Edwards,
Michael Hardy Edwards,
Mary Lynn Edwards Angel,
Christine Egan,
Martin J. Egan Jr.,
Lisa Egan,
Michael Egan,
Samantha Martin Egan,
Carol Eggert,
Lisa Karen Ehrlich,
John Ernst Eichler,
Eric Adam Eisenberg,
Daphne Ferlinda Elder,
Michael J. Alferez,
Mark Joseph Ellis,
Valerie Silver Ellis,
Albert Alfie William Elmary,
Edgar Hendricks Emery Jr.,
Doris Suk Yuen Eng,
Christopher Epps,
Ulf Ram Erickson,
Erwin L. Erker,
William John Irwin,
Jose Espinal,
Fanny Espinoza,
Bridget Ann Esposito,
Francis Esposito,
Michael Esposito,
William Esposito,
Ruben Eskelin Jr.,
Sadie Etty,
Barbara G. Etzold,
Eric Brian Evans,
Robert Evans,
Meredith Emily June Ewart,
Catherine K. Fagan,
Patricia Mary Fagan,
Keith George Fairbairn,
Sandra Fajardo Smith,
William Lawrence Fallon Jr.,
William F. Fallon,
Anthony J. Filoni Jr.,
Dolores Bridget Fanelli,
Robert John Fangman,
John Joseph Fannin,
Kathleen Ann Farragher,
Thomas Farino,
Nancy Carol Farley,
Paige Marie Farley Hackle,
Elizabeth Ann Farmer,
Douglas John Farnham,
John G. Farrell,
John W. Farrell, Terrence Patrick Farrell,
Joseph D. Farrelly,
Thomas Patrick Farrelly,
Siad Abdul Fattah,
Christopher Edward Fawnin,
Whitney R. Faulkner,
Shannon Marie Faber,
Bernard D. Favusa,
Robert Fazio Jr.,
Ronald Carl Fazio,
William Feehan,
Francis Jude Feely,
Garth Erin Feeney,
Sean B. Fagan,
Lee S. Feeling,
Peter Adam Feidelberg,
Alan D. Feinberg, Rosemarie Feliciano, Edward Thomas Fergus Jr.,
George Ferguson,
Henry Fernandez,
Judy Hazel Fernandez,
Julio Fernandez,
Elisa Giselle Ferrana,
Anne Marie Salarine Ferreira,
Robert John Ferris,
David Francis Ferrugio,
Louis V. Persini.
Michael David Ferrugio.
Bradley James Fetchit.
Jennifer Louise Fialco.
Kristen Nicole Fidel.
Samuel Fields.
Alexander Milan Filipov.
Michael Bradley Finnegan.
Timothy J. Finnerty.
Michael Curtis Fiore.
Stephen S.R. Fiorelli Sr.
Paul M. Fiore.
John B. Fiorito.
John R. Fisher.
Andrew Fisher.
Bennett Lawson Fisher.
John Roger Fisher.
Thomas J. Fisher.
Lucy A. Fishman.
Ryan D. Fitzgerald.
Thomas James Fitzpatrick.
Richard P. Fitzsimmons.
Salvatore Fiumifredo.
Christina Donovan Flannery.
Eileen Fletcher.
Andre G. Fletcher.
Carl M. Flickinger.
John Joseph Florio.
Joseph Walken Flounders.
Carol N. Fleesick,
David Foda.
Michael N. Foda,
Stephen Mark Fogel.
Thomas Foley,
David J. Fontana.
Chi Min Fu,
Godwin Ford.
Donald A. Foreman,
Christopher U. Forsythe.
Claudia Alicia Foster,
Noel John Foster.
Anna Fosteris,
Robert Joseph Fody.
Jeffrey Fox,
Virginia Fox.
Pauline Francis,
Virgin Francis.
Gary J. Frank,
Morton H. Frank.
Peter Christopher Frank,
Richard K. Fraser.
Kevin J. Farley,
Clyde Frazier Jr.
Lillian Inez Frederick,
Andrew Fredericks.
Tamitha Freeman,
Brett Owen Fryman.
Peter L. Freund.
Arlene Eva Freed.
Alan Wade Freelander.
Andrew Keith Friedman.
Paul J. Friedman.
Greg J. Froner.
Lisa Ann Frost.
Peter Christian Fry.
Clemente A. Fernando.
Stephen Elliott Furman.
Paul Fermado.
Carlton D.B. Fry.
Frederick Neil Gabler.
Richard Samuel Frederick Gabrielle.
James Andrew Gadil.
Pamela Lee Gaff.
Irvin Vincent Gilardi.
Deanna Lynn Galanti.
Grace Catherine Galanti.
Anthony Edward Gallagher.
Daniel James Gallagher.
John Patrick Gallagher.
Lourdes Galante.
Kono E. Gallo.
Vincenzo Gallucci.
Thomas E. Galvin.
Giovanni Galetti Gambelli.
Thomas Gambino Jr.
Gian Franco Gamboa, Peter Gansey,
Ronald Gamboa, Ladkat K. Ganesh,
Claude Michael Gann,
Osani Gaba,
Charles William Garbarini,
Caesar Garcia,
David Garcia,
Juan Garcia,
Marlene del Carmen Garcia,
Harvey J. Gardner III,
Christopher S. Gardner,
Douglas Benjamin Gardner,
Jeffrey Brian Gardner,
Thomas Gardner,
William Arthur Gardner,
Francesco Garvey,
Rocco Nino Gargano,
James M. Gartenberg,
Matthew David Garvey,
Bruce Gary,
Boyd Allen Gatton,
Donald Richard Gavigan, Jr.,
Peter Allen Gay,
Terrence D. Gazani,
Gary Guidel,
Paul Hamilton Geyer,
Julie Marie Geis, Peter G. Galinas, Stephen Paul Geller, Howard G. Gelling, Peter Victor Jenko Jr., Stephen Gregory Genovese, Elaine Gentoul, Linda M. George, Edward F. Garrity, Suzanne Garrity, Ralph Gerhardt, Robert Gerlich, Dennis P. Germain, Marina Romanova Gertzberg, Susan M. Getzendanner, James G. Geyer, Joseph M. Giacone, Vincent Francis Jamona, Deborah Lynn Gibson, James Andrew Giberson, Craig Neil Gibson, Ronnie E. Geese, Laura A. Giglio, Andrew Clive Gilbert, Timothy Paul Gilbert, Paul Stewart Gilby, Paul John Gill, Mark Y. Gillis,
Evan Gillette, Ronald Lawrence Gilligan, Rodney C. Gillis, Laura Gilly, John F. Ginley, Donna Marie Giordano, Jeffrey John Giordano, John Giordano, Stephen A. Giorgetti, Martin Giovanasso, Cum Girolamo, Salvatore Gito, Cynthia Gigliano, Mon Jambalash, Diane Gladstone, Keith Glasgow, Thomas Irwin Glasser, Edmund Glazer, Harry Glenn, Barry H. Glick, Stephen Glick, John T. Gnazzo, William Rober Gottschalk, Michael Goliamella, Brian Frederick Goldberg, Jeffrey Grant Goldflam, Michelle Goldstein, Monica Goldstein,
Steen,
Andrew H. Galpin,
Dennis James Gomes,
Enrique Antonio Gomez,
Jose Bienvenido Gomez,
Manuel Gomez Jr.,
Wilder Alfredo Gomez,
Jenny Nicole Gonzalez,
Mauricio Gonzalez,
Rosa Gonzalez,
Lynn Catherine Goodchild,
Calvin J. Gooding,
Peter M. Goodrich,
Harry Goody,
Kieran Reddy Gopu,
Catherine C. Goraya,
Lisa Reinhardt Gordenstein,
Corrine Gordon,
Sebastian Gorky,
Karan Joseph Gorman,
Thomas Edward Gorman,
Michael Edward Gold,
Douglas Allen Gowell,
Yoji Goya,
John Richard Grabowski,
Christopher Michael Grady,
Edwin J. Graff III,
David Martin Graffman,
Gil Granados,
Elvira Granito,
Winston Arthur Grant,
Christopher S. Gray,
James Michael Gray,
Tara McLeod Gray,
Linda Catherine Grayling,
John M. Grazioso,
Timothy George Gracioso,
Derek Arthur Green,
Wade B. Green,
Elaine Myra Greenberg,
Gail R. Green,
James Arthur Greenleaf Jr.,
Eileen Marcia Greenstein,
Elizabeth Martin Gregg,
Denise Gregory,
Donald H. Gregory,
Florence Moran Gregory,
Pedro Grehan,
John Michael Griffin,
Tawana Sherry Griffin,
Joan Donna Griffith,
Warren Grifka,
Ramon Grijalvo,
Joseph F. Grillo,
David Joseph Grimner,
Francis Edward Grogan,
Kenneth George Gonzalez,
Joseph Gerzalak,
Matthew James Jamalski,
Robert Joseph Gashar,
Leming Gu,
Jose Guadalupe,
Cindy Yan Chu Guan,
Joel Guevara Gonzalez,
Tabitha Giamamati Guman,
Joseph Gullickson,
Janet Ruth Gustafson,
Douglas Brian Gurian,
Barbara Guzado,
Philip T. Guza,
Gary Robert Haag,
Peter M. Giulavare,
Barbara Mary Habib,
Andrea Lynn Haberman,
Nizam A. Hafiz,
Philip Hensler,
Stephen Michael Haggis,
Karen Elizabeth Haggerty,
David Haldeman,
Mary Lou Haig,
Richard B. Hall,
Maila Rachel Hale, Oswald George Hall,
Robert J. Halligan,
Vincent Gerard Halloran,
James Douglas Havison,
Mohammed Salman Hamdani,
Felicia Hamilton,
Robert Hamilton,
Carl Max Harmon Jr.,
Frederick K. Hahn,
Christopher J. Hanley,
Sean S. Hanley,
Valerie Joan Hanna,
Thomas Hannafin,
Kevin James Hannaford,
Michael Lawrence Hannon,
Dana R. Hannon,
Christine Lee Hansen,
Peter Burt Hanson,
Susan Kim Hansen,
Basilio Haramis,
James A. Herron,
Gerald Francis Hardig,
Jeffrey Pike Hardy, Timothy John Hardgrave,
Daniel Edward Harlan,
Francis Harros,
Harvey Harrell,
Stephen J. Harold,
Melissa Marie Harrington,
Aisha Ann Harris,
Stuart Dennis Harris,
John Patrick Hart,
Eric Hartono,
John Clinton Hartz,
Emmerich Harvey,
Peter Paul Hashem,
Tim's brother Thomas Theodore Haskell Jr.,
Timothy Haskell,
Joseph John Hassan III,
Leonard W. Hatton,
Terrence S. Hatton,
Michael Hobb,
Timothy Aaron Haviland,
Donald G. Havilish Jr.,
Anthony Hawkins,
Nobuhiro Hayatsu,
James Edward Hayden,
Philip Hayes,
Robert J. Hayes,
William Ward Haynes,
Scott Jordan Hazelcorn,
Michael K. Healy,
Roberta B. Heber,
Charles Francis Xavier Hernan,
Neely Ann Heffernan Casey,
John F. Heffernan,
H. Joseph Heller, Jr.,
John Helty Brittle,
Mark F. Hemschult,
Ronnie Lee Henderson,
Brian Hennessy,
Edward R. Hennessy Jr.,
Michelle Marie Henry,
Joseph Henry,
William Henry,
John Christopher Henwood,
Robert Allen Hepburn,
Mary Herencia,
Lindsley C. Harkness III,
Harvey Robert Hummer,
Clarabelle Hernandez,
Eduardo Hernandez,
Nuberto Hernandez,
Raul Hernandez,
Gary Harold,
Jeffrey A. Hirsch,
Thomas Hetzel,
Brian Hickey,
Isidro Hidalgo,
Timothy Higgins,
Robert D. W. Higley II,
Todd Russell Hill,
Clara Victoria Hines,
Neil O. Hines,
Mark D. Hindi,
Katsuyuki Hirai,
Heather Malia Hogue,
Tara Yvette Hobbs,
Thomas Anderson Hobbs,
James J. Hoban,
Robert Wayne Hobson,
Patrick A. Hoey,
Ronald George Horner,
Marcia Hoffman,
John A. Hoffer,
Frederick Joseph Hoffman,
Stephen G. Hoffman,
Judith Florence Hoffmiller,
Michelle Hoffman,
Jonathan R. Holman,
Thomas Warren Holwood Jr.,
John Holland,
Cora Hidalgo Holland,
Elizabeth Holmes,
Joseph F. Holland,
Herbert Wilson Homer,
Thomas Holohan,
James P. Hopper,
Bradley Horn,
Michael Horn,
Montgomery McCullough Horde,
Matthew Douglas Horning,
Robert L. Horajo,
Michael Robert Horrocks.
Aaron Howitz.
Charles Houston.
Uhuru Houston.
George Howard.
Michael C. Howell.
Stephen Leon Howell.
Jennifer L. Howley.
Milagros Romata.
Marianne Kiak.
Stephen Husco Jr.
Chris Roberts Hughes.
Paul Rexford Hughes.
Robert Thomas Hughes.
Thomas Hughes.
Timothy Robert Hughes.
Susan Hughey.
Lamar Hulse.
John Nicholas Humber Jr.
William Christopher Hunt.
Kathleen Ann Hunt Casey.
Joseph Hunter.
Robert R. Yusa.
Abid Hussain.
Thomas Edward Hines.
Walter G. Hines.
Joseph Anthony Iannelli.
United we stand.
Zutu Ibis.
Jonathan Eel P.
Michael Eichen.
Daniel Kanayev.
Frederick Ill Jr.
Abraham Nathaniel Elowitz.
Anthony P. Infante Jr.
Luis Inhiltera.
Christopher Noble and Gracia.
Paul In Allah.
Stephanie Veronica Irby.
Douglas Ergang.
Kristen A. Irvine Ryan.
Todd Antioni Isaac.
Eric Isenprinson.
Taizo Ishikawa.
Walid Joseph Iskandar.
Uram Iskandari An Jr.
John F. Iskian.
Kazushige Itu.
Alexander Valerievich Ivanasov.
Virginia May Jablonski.
Brooke Alexandra Jackman.
Aaron Jeremy Jacobs.
Ariel Lewis Jacobs.
Jason Kyle Jacobs.
Michael Grady Jacobs.
Stephen A. Jacobson.
Jaggernauth.
J. Dennis Jagoda.
Yud Veer Singh Jain.
Maria Jacobiak.
Robert Adrian Halbert.
Ernest James.
Griselda E. James.
Priscilla James.
Mark Stephen Jardim.
Amy Ann Jarrett.
Muhammadu Jawara.
Francois Jean-Pierre.
Maxima Jean-Pierre.
Paul Edward Jeffers.
Alva Cynthia Jeffries Sanchez.
John Charles Jenkins.
Joseph Jenkins Jr.
Alan Keith Jensen.
Prem N. Girath.
Farrah Judy.
Huhidar Jian.
Eliezer Jimenez.
Luis Jimenez Jr.
Fernando Jimenez Molina.
Charles Gregory John.
Nicholas John.
LaShawana Johnson.
Scott Michael Johnson.
William R. Johnson.
Allison Horstman Jones.
Arthur Joseph Jones.
Bryant Leander Jones.
Charles Edward Jones.
Christopher D. Jones.
Donald T. Jones.
Mary R. Jones.
Linda Jones.
Mary S. Jones,
Andrew Jordan,
Robert Thomas Jordan,
Albert Gunia Joseph,
Guyleen Joseph,
Ingborg Joseph,
Carl Henry Joseph,
Stephen Joseph,
Jane Eileen Josiah,
Anthony Jovic,
Angel Warby Jr.,
Karen Sue Jude,
Father Michael F. Judge,
Paul William Jurgens,
Thomas Edward Jurgens,
Kasinga Kabia,
Shash Nikanra Lakshmikan Thaka Daba,
Gakaroy Kamaridana,
Shari Condell,
Howard Lee Kane,
Jennifer Lynn Kane,
Vincent D. Kane,
Jun Ku Kang,
Sheldon Robert Cantor,
Deborah H. Kaplan,
Robin Lee Kaplan,
Alvin Peter Kappelman Jr.,
Charles Karchevsky,
William A. Carnes,
Douglas Jean Karpoloff,
Charles L. Casper,
Andrew K. Cates,
John Katsamatides,
Robert Michael Colfers,
Don Jerome Koth Jr.,
Hideo Kawauchi,
Edward T. Keene,
Richard M. Keene,
Lisa Yvonne Kearney Griffin,
Carol Ann Kiesler,
Barbara A. Keating,
Paul Hanlon Keating,
Leo Russell Keene III,
Joseph John Keller,
Peter R. Kellerman,
Joseph P. Collette,
Frederick H. Kelly Jr.,
My name is Brittany Clark. My father, Keith, was a chef on the 96th floor of the World Trade Center. This poem makes me feel like my daddy is speaking to me. I give you this one thought to keep. I am with you still, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on the snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circle flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not think of me as gone. I am with you still in each new dawn.
James Joseph Kelly,
Joseph A. Kelly,
Richard John Kelly Jr.,
William Hill Kelly Jr.,
Maurice P. Kelly,
Thomas Michael Kelly,
Thomas Richard Kelly,
Thomas W. Kelly,
Timothy Colin Kelly,
Robert Clinton Kennedy,
Thomas J. Kennedy,
John R. Kehoe-Hain,
Ralph Kershaw,
Ronald T. Kerwin,
Howard L. Kestenbaum,
Douglas D. Ketchum,
Ruth Ellen Kettler,
Boris Khalif,
Sarah Khan,
Timur Firaz Khan,
Rajesh Khandenwal,
Oliva Kemrat,
Salih Ku,
Michael Kiefer,
Satoshi Kichuchihara,
Andrew J. Hun Kim,
Lawrence D. Kim,
Mary Jo Kelman,
Henrich Cumming,
Amy R. King,
Andrew M. King,
Robert King Jr.,
Lucille Teresa King,
Lisa King Johnson,
Brian Kenny,
Takashi Kinoshita,
Chris Michael Kirby,
Howard Barry Kirschbaum,
Glenn David Kerwin,
Helen Crossan Kittle,
Richard Joseph Clars,
Peter Anton Klein,
Alan David Kleinberg,
Karen Joyce Klitzman,
Ronald Philip Clifford,
Evgeny Niezev,
Andrew Knox,
Thomas Patrick Knox,
Rebecca Lee Colby,
Deborah A. Kobus,
Gary Edward Kuchiley,
Frank J. Kostner,
Ryan Cohart,
Vanessa Kolpak,
Irina Kolpakova,
Suzanne Kontratenko,
Aye Kone,
Bon Chi Aku,
Dorota Kopitsko,
Scott Ko Pitko,
Bohan Kostic,
Danielle Pusolis,
David P. Cobblson,
John J. Krenn,
William E. Krukowski,
Lee Oud Mi La Se Du,
Shakar Kumar,
Kenneth Compel,
Frederick Kuo Jr.,
Patricia Koras,
Nauka Kushatani,
Thomas Kufikias,
Victor Corky,
Ku E Va E Ku Ak,
Angela Reed Kite,
Andrew LaCourte,
Catherine L. Laborie,
Ma Naud Lackman,
James Patrick Ladley,
Joseph A. LaFosse,
Jeanette Louise LaFond Menachino,
David LaForge,
Michael LaForte,
Alan Charles LaFrance. God bless America.
Juan Lafuente,
Neil Kuang Wa Lai,
Vincent Anthony Laeta,
William David Lake,
Franco Lalama,
Chow Kuan Lam,
Stephen Lamentia,
Amy Hope Lamonsoff,
Nicola Lampley,
Robert Lane,
Brendan Mark Lang,
Roseanne P. Lang,
Vanessa Langer,
Mary Louise Langley,
Peter J. Langone,
Thomas Michael Langoni,
Michelle Bernadette Lanza,
Ruth Sheila Lapin,
Carol Ann LaPlante,
Ingborg Larrabee,
Robin Blair Larkey,
Judith Camilla LaRocque,
Christopher Randall Larrabee,
Hamadou S. Larry,
Scott Larson,
John Adam Lawson,
Natalie Janice Lasden,
Gary Edward Lasco,
Nicholas Craig Lassman, Paul Lazinski, Jeffrey G. Latouche, Charles Lawrenson, Stephen James Loria.
Maria Lavecchi.
Dennis Francis Lavelle.
Janine Mary Gaverdi.
Anna A. Laverty.
Stephen Lorne.
Robert Lawrence.
Nathaniel Lawson.
Eugene Gabrielle Lazar.
James Patrick Leahy.
Joseph Gerard Levy.
Neil Joseph Levy.
Robert G. LeBlanc.
Leon Labor.
Kenneth Charles Lady.
Alan J. Letterman.
Elena F. Ledesma.
Alexis Leduc.
Daniel John Lee.
David S. Lee.
Gary H. Lee.
Keon June Lee.
Juanita Lee.
Catherine Blair